Welcome to the Dog Psychology Podcast with Todd and Art.
Good morning, everyone. It is the Dog Psychology Podcast with Todd and Art. It is morning. Usually we record in the afternoons, but good morning, Todd.
Good morning, Art. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good.
Good morning.
I can never get that right.
Yeah, it takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Actually, no, today is a year to the day I got back on social media. So if you go back to May 15th, 2023, I think I start with Dylan Mulvaney was a thing. And I said, I identify as a social media superstar.
Oh, I do remember that. I think Caesar shared that one too.
Did
he? He's like, welcome back, Todd, to social media or something like that.
Yeah, so it was a year ago today.
Congratulations, man. You've made a huge jump. So that's pretty awesome.
You know, Steve's on fire right now too. He's getting 100,000.
Yeah, because he posts like 3 or 4 times a day. It's crazy.
That's nuts, dude. I can't even get one every other day now. I was posting it. I was dialed in perfectly to the algorithm. Now I'm not. And it's tough, dude. It's so hard to stay consistent.
I don't even care.
It's weird. It's like I care, but I don't. It feels like it's this thing now that if I handle things the right way, it's a resource. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's something that can be utilized for good. So that's where I see that I'm trying to continue to cultivate it.
Yeah.
But it's not easy, dude. It is not an easy thing to do.
Nope. It's hard to upkeep that. So
on that, you know, I get a shit ton of questions. I've even had a proposal. Pretty funny. Most of the stuff has to do, and there's questions I simply won't answer.
Yeah.
The question I will never answer for people or even try to give advice on is possession. I just don't think it's possible in a post. I don't think it's possible. And in anything like that, I think you're going to get bit if you follow any type of YouTube or Instagram advice you're dealing with possession. Yeah. But a lot of dog aggression stuff, you know, 2 dogs in the same house not getting along. Dog was wanting to fight the neighbor's dog. And I think it's a good topic because there's a lot of angles on it.
Mm-hmm. And that is a tough one to address because without seeing, like I always tell people, like without seeing it, without seeing the intensity, it's really hard to say, well, this is what I would do. And that's why, I mean, Lynn was very, very apprehensive about like sharing certain things. Like, I don't know, like it depends. And so, but I think what we can try and do is kind of talk about situations, maybe what causes it, how to reintroduce dogs, how to, keep things safe, how to manage things, but also at the same time work on it.
How to know the difference.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Is knowing the difference between the two. I think, I don't know, we're about the same age. I grew up reading a lot of books that had, they were choose your own ending books. Do you remember those books where you get to a certain point in the book and it'd be like, if you want to continue with this character, go to page 134. If you want to take this, I think in a lot of ways we can talk about things that way too. Right. So I think it's really difficult to give personalized advice when it comes to aggression because of all the nuance. But I think most cases can be gone, all right, you're going to see this ending, or this ending, and help people understand how to read what they're looking at. So people can shape their own thing. So how do you see it? I mean, so you've been doing this for a very long time. Very common phone call we get is, hey, Art, I've got 2 or 3 dogs. I'm always blown away when anybody has more than 3 dogs. I'm just absolutely fucking floored when somebody that doesn't do this for a living has 4 or 5 dogs. I'm like, what the fuck?
Even when you do this for a living, you have 7 dogs. You're like, what was I thinking?
Yeah, right. You know, so you get the call that, hey, these 2 dogs are fighting. Where do you go from there? Like, I have a series of questions I'll ask because to me, it tells me where the dogs are at with each other. Right. So like, what are some of the questions you ask people when they start to drop this on you?
That's a really good question. I'd probably do it.
Maybe give you some.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah,
because I do it very differently. I think
one of the first things if somebody calls me and says, "Hey, I have 2 dogs that are fighting," I want to try to envision how close the dogs are. Right. So I'll ask things like, do they touch each other? Do the dogs play with each other? Do they sleep with each other? So just trying to get a picture of how much are the dogs in the intimate space of the other dog. Because, you know, if I think one of the hardest cases is when the dogs are really, really close with each other, but have a really odd intermittent fight, like legitimate fight, like brothers or sisters would fight, but they're really close. They play, they sleep, they eat next to each other. You start to ask questions. All right, so will the dogs ever, get tense or growl over them getting close over food or bones or humans? You can't just ask the humans questions.
Yeah.
Because they seem to me to always go down the path there the way they see it. I'm trying to get answers that allow me to have more clarity, and it's usually the intimacy between the dogs. If there isn't any, then it's like, well, duh, of course they're going to fight. But if there is, then it's like, okay, then I typically see it as space, excitement, or resources, combination of the three, right? And start to try to break it down from there. And obviously the formula to recover it we're pretty consistent with that, I would imagine, but it's the interpretation of it is what I'm trying to get initially until I'm there seeing it.
Space and resources. Yeah. And so some of the things that I ask is, the basic questions, like how long have they been together? What has changed in the last, is a big one, because when you start really, because sometimes people are like, nothing's changed, but then you get really deep into it, my father passed away, or, you know what I mean? Like something has changed. The energy.
Will you ask, are you comfortable enough to ask if people are fighting with their spouse?
If I go in the home, you can already feel it. You can already tell. You don't have to ask that question. And especially if they're both there, you can already tell.
I'm saying, but like sometimes, like, I'm doing a lot of online stuff.
Yeah.
I'm doing stuff now that is a little bit of distance between it, and you're trying to, like you just said, change.
Yeah.
That one's big, and some people aren't gonna.
Well, the way I've asked is like, has there already been is there anything that's changed in the house? Have you moved? Are you going through a life change? Are you fighting? Is there some sort of tension between you and someone else? Like, I don't say the spouse, I just ask, kind of throw it out there. You know what I mean? So then they kind of like, yeah, well, they kind of answer the question. So it's not like, are you and your husband fighting? Are you going through divorce? It's not so direct. It's kind of like leading them for them to answer or come to their own conclusion. You know what I mean?
When I say it, I'm more nuanced to it. But I think I'm shape it more like you just said. Is there any tension between people in the house? Is a good comment, because it's underestimated how much it affects things, especially if it's the he-she dog. Like if one dog belongs to one person and one dog belongs to another person, and those humans have friction. Early on, it seems like some of my gnarly, I don't know if it's just my memories is this way. Some of my crazier appointments were early on. So I haven't been living in Florida long, and I would travel because I would take any appointment I could get. So I would travel pretty good distances. And I'm in this country area, and I have they're doctors, psychiatrists, and they're married. And you walk in and the tension could be cut with a knife. They really did hate each other. And it kind of was, they were talking about it as they really didn't like each other. And their dogs wanted to kill each other. So one of them had one dog, like, this is my dog, and the other lady, and this is my dog. And those dogs, I remember, so badly wanted to just fuck each other up. And not too long after their appointment, I found out that guy killed himself.
Wow.
Yeah. And there was what was memorable about the appointment was the feeling in the house.
Wow.
I've had a few of those where you just walk out and you're like, you can't even believe the feeling you had in the house. Right. And I mean, it's to the point where I even remember being like, look, there's not a whole lot that can be done. You guys, these dogs are essentially manifesting your feelings.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just going to be how it goes. But that level of how people feel in the house can go into the dog super easy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And if you think about that, like he was probably already thinking about death. And so the dogs can also want to fight to end the other one as well. It's just, that's odd. That's a really, I mean, I've had some crazy stories, but never one like that. That's pretty interesting. Now, I think that, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it's on the same vein. I think one of the things that greatly affects dogs too is it's, how many people have to take care of a loved one while they're dying. Jen just had to do that. And in nature, what do the sick do in nature? In almost any herd or pack, what do they do?
They leave it
and go die, right?
Yeah.
And I would imagine it has to do with some natural stress hormone or natural thing that in reverse, if you do it the other way, it just trashes you. So when you keep something
Yeah.
in the environment that all the animals know, like this thing, what's happening with this? I think that it has a great impact on them as well. And there's all these things that your dogs are going to give you the animal version of. And until you've been in that situation, have to care for somebody like that, it's hard to, and I think the humans get battered by it too. It's hard to like really tangibly understand the effect of it. And I get these calls all the time. You know, my mother-in-law came in with a dog and we have this dog and I'm caring for my mother-in-law and the dogs aren't getting along, you know? So what do you, let's go to a question. I know you're about to say something, but what do you consider aggression? Like there's one thing.
Aggression, in my opinion, is with the intention to kill. So that's why I like a lot of times when people say my dog is aggressive, I'm like,
So
you
it's the
know,
intention to off it. Just,
yeah, just to kill. And
and,
I've been around some of those dogs, you know what I mean? And so,
and what would you say is the biggest difference when you're interpreting those dogs and assessing those dogs versus dogs that are what a lot of people think are aggressive, but are just reacting?
well, a lot of times what I've noticed is when people say my dog is aggressive because they only see the action of moving forward on a leash,
Mm-hmm.
and they see that barking, the lunging, and people always interpret that as my dog is aggressive. When in fact it's just it could be the very simple fact that your dog actually is a very social dog, really excited, doesn't know how to self-regulate itself. So when his association with dogs is I want to move forward towards the dog in a way that's like playful, which is
Mm-hmm.
still a forward mind, which is still fight. And then now they're on a leash, and then you see the reaction. They're at the end of the leash, and people don't know what to do with the leash, and then they don't know how to handle their own emotions, and so they're embarrassed, and they're like, and they get angry, and then they start, doing like a correction. The dog's like, what the heck? Like, I don't know what we're doing here, and so we see the owner sees as aggression, but in me, I just see a dog that is just trying to move forward. And this is the point I think that is really important, is that how you can stop one thing in one area, you can stop in other areas as well, right? And so when we talk about like addressing something, or even setting something up, you don't always have to wait for a dog. If your dog is reactive towards another dog, find something else that it moves forward towards in a smaller sense, and work on that as opposed to like going out into throwing them in the fire.
I know exactly what you mean, but would you be more clear in what you're talking about, setting up something else besides the dog? And to add to that whole thing about what a really aggressive dog looks like, silence
Yeah,
you know what I mean? The dogs that really
yeah,
are going to fuck things up are silent.
yeah,
They're not at the end of the leash carrying on.
yeah,
They had their agenda is different. And I mean, the worse you might get them, they might whine and vibrate a certain way. You might get some of that, the ones that are super pent up, but that's an easy signal that's missed. So what do you mean? Like, how do you set something up, or how do you tell your clients to set something up to deal with, over here, your dog's reaction is a high level.
mm-hmm.
You're not going to get it under control unless you practice over here at a lower level. How do you set that up for your clients?
So again, if a dog is moving forward towards another dog, let's say, on a walk, and let's say we go on a walk and we don't see another dog, and people are like, what am I going to do? I was like, what is your dog? Does your dog like food? Loves food. Like goes crazy for food. Boom. I have an idea. How about toys? What about balls? Oh my God, he's ball obsessed. Okay. I already have an idea what I'm going to do now. Right. So I don't need the dog. I can find anything that makes the dog move forward. So if let's say if a dog is like super obsessed with the ball, I start there. If you can stop him from moving forward towards the ball and get the attention back to you, you can do the exact same thing with a dog on a walk. Now, here's the other thing: is that people can use a ball to redirect off of the. This is a really important part, by the way. I think that not a lot of people realize is that when we use the redirection technique, like so, and I've used it before and it works great, but sometimes it doesn't work great and I'll tell you why when it doesn't work great is because now we've moved the problem off of something onto something else. We've redirected our attention, our energy onto something else. And so basically what happens is I want the dog to see the trigger as a non-issue, be neutral to the thing that it is. I want it to be neutral towards the ball, but I want to be able to trigger that fight again if I want to be able to, like, and to set it up. So when I talk about redirection, like people's like, if my dog is reactive, I can use food or a toy, again, which I've done. But I also have the understanding of that when we redirect the attention off of the dog onto the ball, now what we've done is the dog becomes stuck. It doesn't ever really become calm in the situation. So now we've just taken that excitement off of the dog onto the ball. But if you don't have a ball, then the dog is stuck, right? And so for me, like I want the dog to go into a, what Caesar would call calm surrender, just be neutral to the idea of there's a dog, but also if I want the dog to also be neutral to the ball as well, not be so obsessed with it. Like you get the attention of me, and I think that's the difference when people do use redirection. And that's not what I'm doing, by the way. I'm not using redirection at that moment. I'm saying stop the intensity of how the dog moves forward in this situation. Then we take it outside and do it the same thing with the dog in a way. You can use sound, anything to get that attention back to you.
Well, redirecting is kind of the line in the sand that separates training styles too. So that the world that uses more positive approaches stop right there because they see corrections as a negative. And honestly, they're part right. A bad correction is as damaging as rewarding bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a sweet spot people are trying to find. The redirection thing really gets people. Like what you just explained is really difficult for people to understand that if you just redirect excitement from the dog to you, you haven't done anything. It maybe feels like it because the dog's not staring at or reacting to the other dog.
Right.
I kind of go through a series. I'll do a quick physical redirection. I'm big into using movement. Right? If you get your dog tuned into you the right way with the leash and you just move a couple of steps in one direction, you'll see that the energy gets thrown off and the mind goes back into a quick follow is one way to do it. But it's in the absence of that follow or surrender state, you're always going to be managing that energy and pushing it around in different places. People have been told not to snap their dog out of it. I mean, that's part of the problem. Same thing with parents, though. It's the same thing. It's the mentality. Like the people writing the books are the ones that have the hardest time thinking something's uncomfortable for a moment. Mm-hmm. But if you watch the animal world, if you watch dogs deal with the excitement of other dogs, I mean, it is clear where they draw the line on what behavior is tolerated. And that's the difference. Is it doesn't matter what you're stopping. You used that example earlier, that forward kind of example. Mm-hmm. Again, that's for people that are trying to get control of a reactive dog. Get control of excitement regarding anything. And what we mean by control is picture what it looks like for the dog to mentally and then physically get excited and move towards something. And right in that beginning process, what can you use? There's sound. I'm sure everybody's got the way they would explain this. There's sound you can use. There's physical pressure you can use. And there's smell. I've used a squirt gun with a vinegar water solution in it to stop a dog from moving forward towards me. Mm-hmm. So there's various ways if you know what you're trying to create. When I use food, I tend to use it in a licking fashion. And I'll use it on the softer dogs. I'll use it on the dogs that have become excited and trapped amongst the leash type of thing, where the owners have taken this timid dog and pulled on the leash so much that it's made them go forward. If I'm ever using food, it's for those dogs. And it's just because they can actually lick the food, look at what's over there and be, and then I'll pay them at the end of it.
Right.
And that is, if I'm using food, it's because that's the reaction I'm getting from it, to where the dog is actually facing what the problem is. To me, the licking creates more of a relaxed mindset. A lot of dogs will take the food and and so there's too much energy to that. It's just taking energy from one thing to the other. So if I'm going to use food, that's the reaction that I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've ever seen these things. I saw them a long time ago. They're kind of cool. It's called a lickety stick.
Yeah.
And it's like a band roll on, but it's got bacon flavor. And you can hold it out. Groomers use them a lot. And I think licking is better than eating. If anybody's trying to use food, licking is always going to give you a better reaction. So these little lickety sticks gets the dog licking.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll get like some kibble in my hands and I just let the smell and let them taste it, but not actually give it to them. Mm-hmm. And I like what you said, I give it to them at the end. And that's something that I tell people, I was like, look, what we're doing here is like you work for 2 weeks and you get a paycheck on Friday, right? So you have to go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and repeat the process the next week. You have to go through 10 days of work before you actually get paid on that Friday. think of it like that for your dog. They have to do X, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z, and then you pay at the end. Same
I
thing.
hate it when people pay me for things before I do it. I'd so much rather be paid at the end. Like if I do a board and train or something, I hate it when people give me a checkup for like a full amount up front. No, 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 no. Just hang on to something. Like I want to be paid at the end, just like you said. So how, we started talking about aggression and leash reaction. How about in the house, right? So you get a call that a couple of dogs are fighting in the house. Do you have like a recipe to help a generalized approach that you take people through to help dogs get along better in the house?
Yeah. So after we ask all the questions, and let's say there's two dogs, and then now they're having to separate them because as soon as they get back, they just go back to fighting. And again, that goes back to how they were separated. Because if they were, separated, and energy's high, and then just go right back into it, I think there's a process which we can talk about later. But some of the things that I do is reintroducing them in to do things together. We move together. And usually the first thing I'll do is like, hey, let's get them to go on a walk together. Get them to a leash. I can keep them on each side, but now we're getting them to do something, to move together, to migrate together and move. And so I start there, and I keep the leash on them. All right. And then so I start to reintroduce a lot of the things that they would normally used to do. But now we're trying to get them in the house to coexist. And sometimes I'll tie one off over here. I tie one off over here. And I also want to make mention that if you do this, always be in the presence of your dog if you're going to be tying off. Don't ever leave them unattended. Don't leave the house when they're on a leash. Just want to throw that out there. And so then the other thing is that I get them to be, when you go on a walk, now they're coming to go rest together. So we're coexisting by resting together, because what happens is that the energy starts to build up a lot of times when they're playing. And that's a key thing, I think, is the amount of play that the dogs do. Because if you think about
absolutely.
if you were to play a video in slow motion of dogs playing and you watched it, it looks exactly like they're fighting. So they're sparring, right? And so it's like they're training, they're sparring to, and if there's a disagreement about something, they already know how they're going to fight because they've already practiced it.
And play, as in any social, especially predator animals, play serves the purpose of obviously the practice of the hunt and the social hierarchy games. So when you watch puppies play, even to the point you just said, you're not just seeing play. You're seeing the practice of how I'm going to fuck you up in the future.
Right.
If it gets to that point. And the other thing too is that for people who are like, well, they seem happy. Yeah, I get it. But like any two brothers that play a lot, sometimes an elbow accidentally hits and play turns to a fight.
Yeah.
The energy level is already there, and opening that door up and letting dogs have unfettered play have that potential to fight is a huge mistake.
Yeah. Also, when that does happen, people don't realize that. I had a client that they had 3 dogs, and they'd been doing fine for years, and they played, and then a trash truck came through the alley, and then they were already at a high level, and then they charged the fence, and one of the dogs just redirected on the other dog.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, it came out of nowhere. I'm like, not really. It didn't really come out of nowhere. It actually has been building up. They've been waiting, not they were like intentionally waiting for this moment. When the energy builds up and they can't reach something, they redirect on whatever's near them. And that happens a lot even when people walk their dogs on leash. They just got to get their mouth. They're just going crazy. It's not intentionally directed at you. It's just like you're the closest thing.
Well, it's like I describe it as like a bar fight. It's like if you're in the midst of really going at it and something grabs you from behind, I mean, you can turn around and go at it just because you're in the mindset, and anything that touches you is potentially a part of that, and the tool that actually, if you have dogs that play like this, and this is how I was introduced to it as well, hands down, if you're just trying to get through the X-Dog vest.
I know, I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
Oh, dude. You know what the sentence that they need to print on the side of this thing? Because this is what literally every human that comes back to me after using the tool says. Do you know what they say?
What's that?
Thing was a game changer. They go, this tool is a game changer. I just gave it to somebody that had a Rottweiler, and it was just like they came back to me.
And what Todd is talking about is the X-Dog, xdog.com. It's a company out here in Texas, and it's a weighted vest, and you can weigh them down with rice, sand, BBs, depending on the situation. BBs actually is more dense. It's a lot heavier. Yep. And so what it does, it basically slows the dog down. It almost like it's instantly will just like slow a dog down. So if you get 2 dogs or like 2, excited around other dogs, you can just put this vest on there and it just like the dog's like, what the heck? And so it just changes the association of how they should be around the other dogs.
And then ultimately, if you're trying to, let's say you want to stop using the tool, you have to intentionally phase it out, right? So you would put your dogs, you put it on your dogs for, if you're letting them play for 30 minutes, and then the last 5 minutes you take it off. So then they're going to be playing without the vest, but they're already tired and the intensity is different. And you're trying to your point of patterns that we've always talked about, you're just trying to change the pattern and the style that they interact, and then pull back on the vest so that you don't have to always use it. Because the question I'm always presented with, and I think when things get lined up in the right way, they're really going to try to take this thing mainstream behaviorally, kind of like the Thunder shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to use guys like us to do it, because there's not a human I haven't given it to that doesn't say things like, holy crap, this is a game changer. I can't believe what it did.
Mm-hmm.
But vets and all these other people, I know there's going to be blowback on, yeah, but their backs and their knees and their
joints. Yeah.
and their joints. And it's like, come on, guys, you can't immediately go to something like that.
We can also say, what about their life? They're about to kill each other.
Yeah, there's always this balancing act, and plus, I think I'm assuming people are going to be reasonable. I use it on the heavy side, but I'm using it so I can make substantial change right away. And then what I want to do is I want to phase it back as quick as I can. I want to use a tool as, what do you say? As much as you need, but as little as
possible, but as much as you need.
There you go. And I'm just I've always approached it that way. But that tool right there for dogs that have issues in the same house, hands down, is the easiest quick change artist for you. So I like what you're saying. So you said first thing you'll teach people to do is to walk your dog. So you're doing
walk your dogs, kind of get some of the energy out, come back. Let's all learn to coexist in the same room together to learn how to rest.
About anchoring dogs, like I do the exact same thing. So I encourage people to take one leash and hook it to one side of the couch, one leash, hook it to the other side of the couch, so that the dogs can be in the same room. But let's say they both got pissed and they charged ahead, they can't make contact. I don't want another fight to happen. I'm really trying to move this forward as opposed to just letting it, but at the same time, having the humans be like, you have to act like you don't care. You have to kind of bring a freedom in the house while at the same time being really structured.
Yeah. Another thing that you mentioned that dogs will also fight over was space. So I want people to also be aware, because let's say you separate them and like after you come from walk and they're already going like popping off on each other. Try to create more distance from that, right? And more distance between them so that, start big and then slowly work your way in. But also, I want to also mention that you should also have extra leashes on hand, because if one dog tries to bite through the leash, you can put the slip another leash back on the dog real quick. Not that I've ever seen that, but I'm already preparing, like that could happen. That is a possibility. But using distance and space is a tool you can use to your advantage, so that you can create the resting, right? Let's go back to resting. And if dogs have like been okay before in the past, I always know like it can happen.
I'm trying to get back to where they were. If dogs were friends and they started to fight and they were friends for a period of time, I believe you can always get them back to it.
Yeah.
Environment can play a big role, though. The inability to change. I remember I had 2 dogs that were fighting daily in the house they were at every day. And they came here and I told the people, I go, if they come here and stop fighting, it's going to be real difficult for you, meaning that your environment has that much of a hold on it. And they were here for 5 weeks. And the trainers I had here at the time couldn't believe that they were here for fighting, because they got along so well while they were here. And within a week of going home, right back at it.
Yeah.
And it sometimes the environment, it can be that strong of a role. If it was a street dog, it was a real strong-minded street dog that they brought into their home, and they already had a strong-minded dog, and these were really soft energy people. And they had these 2 strong dogs that, they couldn't influence it at all. So what I think we have a lot of trainers that watch this, and the questions that I ask, because what I'm trying to get people to see is what triggers the fight, so they can know where they need to be the most vigilant.
Right.
Because some dogs can really be in really compromised situations and never have a problem, never fight. And then you put them in another situation and sure as shit, right? So when I say excitement, space, and resources, excitement to me is anytime excitement is injected into the environment, such as a fence fighting situation, knocking on the door, a squirrel, anything that interjects an excited pulse into the environment, what do the dogs do? Because as you said earlier, that oftentimes turns into, that energy just gets redirected into each other. Where they go to the squirrel, they hit the fence,
Mm-hmm.
they hit each other, and boom,
Mm-hmm.
now they're going at each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I say space and resources, oftentimes this is one and the same. Um, some dogs are just possessive of the area they're at, the thing they're using, the food they have. And no matter how passive they are at other times, they're going to not allow another dog near their shit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that can also include a human. So that
Mm-hmm.
might mean that they jump on your lap and now they claim you. Because that's kind of also a resource. And this is so that now
Mm-hmm.
you're back to what is the dog? And this is where some people struggle, why they'll say, it came out of nowhere, is it's what does the dog view as important? It's
Yeah.
not what we view as important. It's how does the dog view something? Because now we're like, okay, the dog sees this particular tile over in the corner as important. And if you can identify that, it helps you know how to manage, how to establish your situations, when to anchor, like when are you safe to let the dogs coexist, right? Like if you have an excited issue, you can let your dogs coexist if you can control the excitement.
Mm-hmm.
Or you learn to control the excited reaction of your dog, and you're back to what we were talking about, just the forward brain, right?
Yeah.
But I'm to assume if you've already called us, it's because you haven't been regulating the forward brain in any part. So now we have to manage it. And to me, the difference between management and work is, and when I'm in a management situation, a fight can't happen. And when I'm in a working situation, a fight can happen, but I'm prepared for it and I'm preventing it and I'm trying to improve my situation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That's kind of
Yeah.
how I see the difference. And when I explain to clients what they're trying to really accomplish, is I say it's like a bank, okay? We're trying to deposit calm surrender time. So if we can get them to walk next to each other, that's calm surrender time. If we can get them to relax in the living room, that's calm surrender time. If we can get them to play with each other properly, that's happy-go-lucky time. And all of this is like pennies. You deposit this in the bank in pennies.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to prevent a fight because that's like a withdrawal. And a withdrawal comes out in dollars. All these little deposits are in pennies. And we're trying to balance out this management working system so that we're always depositing, even if it's a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the human mind is too eager or too tense one way or the other. So they just want to say, fuck it, and let the dogs be, or they're too afraid and they never let it grow. And to me, that's the balancing act.
Yeah. Of the three, excitement, space, and resources, which is the hardest one for people to see, you think?
Good question. Probably space.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I believe, because you obviously you can see excitement. It presents itself. You can see it. Resources, you can see food, you can see toys, you can see a human that also the dogs may see as a resource.
And we've also been conditioned to look for it. I mean, think of the word resource guarding, right? So we've already been conditioned to see it that way.
But space, people have a hard, it's not tangible. Like, you know what I mean? So like, I mean, yes, you can see like the distance, but it's something that people won't recognize right away, that the dog is actually, it's not that it's aggressive. It actually just wants its space from that other dog.
I think the humans that see in those terms, like think about walking through a crowd. There's certain humans who want more space. I think that human tends to see it a little bit more. But anybody that wants, and a part of it has to do too, is that the concept of moving a dog out of space and loving a dog don't correlate. So we're almost conditioned that if there is space, if you're controlling space or moving a dog back, it's a negative. You know what I mean? It's like any type now of what's perceived as that is definitely negative. And so space is a weird commodity, and it is in the animal world. It's money, dude. I mean, that's how they flex.
Yeah. By the way, because you just kind of were touched, it was a little nugget you just said there, where dogs are controlling space, and a lot of times people will see, let's say, a dog like growling, and people see that as that is the dog that's the problem. But it's the other dog that no one is advocating for, that dog that wants its space. Sometimes when people get a new dog, like a puppy, and they're like, oh, my older dog doesn't like the other dog. It's not that, it's used to being by itself. Can we get him to appreciate? Yes, but we also have to control that space in the beginning so that puppy or whatever is not all over that dog. You know what I mean? And so like,
this is hugely important, Art. I think this is really important because, and this is something that Lynn really made apparent to me, that in essence, when you bring in this new dog, your dog is holding you responsible for what happens.
Yeah.
So your inability to control the excitement or pushiness of this new dog, be it a puppy or an older dog, now is it deteriorates the relationship that you had with your current dog. I mean, that's a common thing that happens where you and this dog have this great relationship. You go and get a second dog that's kind of a dick to this dog. You can't control this dog. This dog can't really control this dog, right? And it comes in and creates friction. It'd be like right now if you brought in, if Steve came to live with you.
Oh God, no.
You know what? You know, like your wife's going to be like, "What the fuck?" You know, because it's you got this energy now that's so strong. You know what? You get it. Yeah. Love you, Steve. Yeah. And so I think that's underestimated. And so if you bring a dog in that you can't control, you're both giving that control to your resident dog to do, and you're eroding things with your resident dog. So I think people need to keep that in mind.
You know, that's something that I always talk about at our socials, because like sometimes we get those like nervous dogs and they're like, oh, but my dog growls and shows teeth to the dogs. I'm like, don't worry about it. Like let him, he's telling us that he's uncomfortable, right? Let him express himself. I'll advocate for him. Say, hey, I got you. I'll be in your team. No one else is doing it. I'll go ahead and ask that other dog to keep moving to get out of your space so that he doesn't do it. Because if he does it, he's going to use the way, you know, I think Caesar one time said, if you let dogs, because, you know, sometimes at a dog park, like, oh, just let them be dogs. Let them do what they're going to do. And Caesar goes, if you let them do what they're going to do, they're going to do what they're going to do. And the way they do that is with their mouth. Yep. And so if you let them do what they're going to do, you're going to have to, you know, face the consequences of what they do. And so
where do you draw the line, right? So how do you help people know what to let a dog do and when do you step in? You know what I'm asking?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the first time you see it, like
how about if it's an older dog with a puppy? How much do you let the older dog get away with, and how much do you regulate?
It depends on the older dog, but I'll tell you that when I had my dog Frankie, I always put him around puppies because I knew he knew what to do. Like he helped me out. He knew how to set a clear boundary with the dog, but not overdo it. You know, he wouldn't go out and like, you know, he would growl at a dog. He would move forward just to clear that space. And if they didn't get the point, then he would keep moving towards them until they actually did that. It's almost like that video that we play at TCW at that Italian dog park, and you got that German Shepherd that. So those people trust that dog to know that he's going to make the right decision. But you have to.
The more you look at that video, you can see that it was set up on some level.
Of course it was.
You know what I mean? That was all premeditated. Nobody sits around and watches. There's probably a dog training.
It is.
Experience. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's their dog trainers in Italy that they do these socials like that.
And the dude that comes in with his arms crossed must be the trainer.
Yep, the guy right in the middle. That's
and the big German Shepherd and that other Shepherd are his.
Yes.
And he walked up to the Husky, so he initiated it the way he walked up to the Husky.
Yep.
Right? You can see that?
Yep. That's my assessment too. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But and then at the end when the Husky goes back, it probably goes back to the owners that are sitting down over there, right?
Correct.
And so these are all things because of what we have seen how interactions play out. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Yeah. I think this whole thing with knowing how to regulate is important because it's how I feel like I've really helped a lot of dogs over the years. Is you bring these dogs in that are quote unquote aggressive, but they're really kind of nervous about a dog coming into their intimate space, and I'll regulate that for a period of time. I've always envisioned it like an astronaut helmet around their head and their butt, you know, and most dogs need that big space around their head and their butt initially that don't have that social thing. So I would keep that space clear when they first come in for a couple of days. And then I would slowly, like, they would have to cope with that pressure coming in. And so then you start to see where they can handle it and they can handle it. And I always somehow knew when the dog was ready for me to just go, okay, you're good. Like I can tell you can self-regulate just enough. From a distance, I'll keep certain areas of your space clear for now. And then kind of over the days coming that you just expect more and more. And then you can even leave them and you're like, and walk into the other side of the yard and you start to know that, okay, this dog is good in this situation. But it's keeping the clear mind too. And knowing, like you were saying, how much space a dog needs, being able to see something that's not there, I guess The important part is what's happening, what's not happening, and then knowing how much a dog can take. And I think the ultimate one, as it comes, at least for our job, is knowing how a dog will respond if a correction is thrown out, not from us, but from another dog, right? So there's all these variables. Okay, can your dog handle being around dogs that are excited? Yeah, I got that. Can your dog handle dogs coming into space? Got that. Can your dog handle when there's bones and toys around and so forth? Yeah, got that. And then you can. What was one I was just starting to say before that? My mind just went south. It was about like the way that I would see it to regulate it before I could know that I could let it go. Fuck, I don't even know that.
Hey, I did a virtual session with somebody recently, and she had two dogs, and they got into a fight. And I asked all the questions like, "What's changed?" And so as I was asking her all the questions, she was like, I brought in a foster dog one time, and that's when the fight happened. And I'm like, "Is the foster dog still there?" She's like, "No." I was like, "Are they getting into fights?" She's like, "No," but she was scared to get them together. So I think and so my instructions to her was like, okay, they've been together before, they've lived together before, so we can always go back to it. I was like, why don't you get your dog a muzzle? It's a very good tool, and practice all the things that you've done before. If you miss something, if you happen to miss something, at least we have the option of the muzzle. And I just told her practice everything you've done before, everything I've told you to do by going on walks. Because she was already doing that. She was already going on walks, and she's like, they're fine on walks, She's like, but she was nervous about reintroducing them inside the house. And so after you've done the whole leash thing and they're learning to settle, then I'll get them used to a muzzle. Then I start giving them a little more freedom, doing the things that they used to do, but with also the intention of trying to slow things down. So they start playing again, learning how to slow those things down, but using the muzzle so that if you do miss something and something happens, they're not going to hurt themselves again.
Yeah. So you're saying during the transition of going from, okay, we're doing the walking, we're doing a little bit of anchoring. Now we need to get back into real life scenarios.
Right.
Yeah. And this is now where a muzzle is and again, it has to do with a couple of things. A muzzle to me is going to be if the damage from one dog to another can be severe. So if there's a size discrepancy, I definitely think a muzzle is vital.
Yeah.
Because, a 60 or 70 pound dog can kill a 10-pound dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not even in, what I mean? Not even in a serious way.
Yeah. Could you just use a muzzle to muzzle punch and kill the dog?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I think muzzles are helpful in a couple of situations. One, when it's damaged, and two, like you just said, if the human can't unpucker. Like if you legitimately sit there and you're tight and your ass is puckered up the whole time your dogs are around each other, you need something.
Yeah.
You need to meditate. You need to talk to somebody. You need to have a cocktail.
Send him to Brian Gruber.
Well, this is the part that one of the things we didn't talk about last week, what have we seen after working with, thousands of students? I'll tell you, everybody's going through shit. If you don't address your shit, you're not going to be able to help your dog. And so if every time you get into a panic situation, you allow yourself to completely melt down, not know where you're at, throw your arms around, and then don't look to us for help. You need to find somebody that can get your arms at your side, get you breathing, right? You need to find somebody that can bring a sense of confidence to that moment before I'm necessarily going to be able to step in. And I think we all have the skill set to help people in extreme situations, but there's some people who have simply not addressed the traumas and the stuff in their life. And then every time being around dogs that are aggressive, in my opinion, triggers a reaction in our brain that comes from when we were food. Okay. So in my belief, one of the reasons that aggression is the behavior that really crumples people down is because, naturally speaking, when you get in that environment, your brain goes fight, flight, and people don't do either. People don't do either. They sit there and scream. They don't run away, right? They don't get involved. They find this thing where they stay there and they don't act. And it turns into like a traumatic experience, legitimately, because the brain is now completely confused and it doesn't want that situation again. So, but it has to go on a walk. It has to walk up to that dog. It's like walking into the lion's mouth every time these people walk up to a dog. And the dog's like, the dog can tell. And this is the part that I think is understated in all of this, is that people have had severe trauma when it comes to aggression. And I fully believe it's the primal side of us as food, but we're not addressing it from that point of view. I've had to condition myself to stay in a fight. Some people naturally will and some people naturally won't. I don't think I'm going to stay in a fight I'm a fighter, but I'm out, you know? And so like that guy, when we were in the parking lot, you and I had completely different reactions. I am ready to fucking fight that motherfucker or get out of there.
Well, I was too, by the way, and
That's good to know, but you were a lot closer than I would have been.
Here, and just so you guys know, Todd and I, one morning, it's early in the morning. It's like 6 a.m, and we're headed to the car to go to the DPC for TCW. There's a car that's parked
and our
right
car's
next
tucked around a wall, by the way.
Yes.
So
So it's the wall, and then
it.
it's your car, and then it's this guy's car, and this guy's car is parked backwards. Okay, so the back end is in. And so I see I'm walking onto the passenger side, and there's a big dude standing behind the car, and he has his head down. And I thought, oh crap. And then I noticed he's crying, and I was like, hey dude, you okay? And he starts to share like, oh, my mom my mom passed away, and he starts sharing all these things with me.
The way it looked initially is like his mom just died. Like he got the news as he was standing behind the car, right? Which kind of made sense.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I don't think she had just said. I think he was just having a moment where he was kind of just thinking of her. So, anyways, like he, I started. So, where are you from? What's your name? He told me his name, and I'm just trying to like build some rapport with him, just kind of try to connect with him, and he's answering all my questions, but you could tell he's devastated. And then it comes out that his mom. I don't think he didn't say this, but in the way he answered, it didn't sound like it just happened. I think he was just having a moment, and he was just thinking of her, and it was early in the morning. And I said, where are you from? He's like, I'm from Redondo Beach. And I was like, Redondo Beach is really...
He wasn't dressed like he would have been doing anything specific in the morning, like working out, going to work.
Yeah, he looked like almost like a homeless guy in a way. And so he was like, oh, I came up here to shoot some guns. And so immediately I'm like, all right. So I'm already like checking him out, where his hands are at, like all these things. And I was like, if this guy goes after me, what are you going to do? Like, so I'm already preparing, but I'm still kind of like not giving that away. But he was, he was kind of nice. And then I feel you come behind me, kind of way behind me. Thanks a lot, Todd. No, I'm just kidding.
Fuck off, dude. I was right behind you.
I know.
I was what, 4 feet behind you?
Yeah. And so then, I just like,
you were 4 feet too close to that motherfucker.
And I'm like, dude, like, I think I said, I said, I'm going to pray for you, man. Could you mind if I pray for you? And I was like, yeah, can I, and I asked him for his name. And I said, that's how I asked him about his family, and he told me about his daughter. I'm just asking questions, I'm just trying to like I'm trying to get him to like, if he's going to get like aggressive, like just trying to calm him down, ask questions. And he's very forthcoming. So at this point, I don't feel very threatened, but you never know, right? And so I'm just like, okay, his hand's right here. If he comes over here, he's probably a right hand. He's probably going to go after me. So these are all thoughts are going in my head, I was like, okay, so I'm going to just do a toss. I'm just like, what would I do in these situations? Because you never know, man. But that's how I think anyways. I go to a public place. I'm like, where are the exits around here from my family,
You should. I mean, we got to have some type of awareness. Now, what did the guy, he shakes your hand. He's like, oh, dude, you got to wash your hand because I have gunpowder residue on my hand.
Yeah.
Right. So in my mind, I'm like, this guy either just offed a couple of people and he's crying because he's just offed a couple of people. And now he's got all of that DNA on Art.
Yeah.
And I gave him a little fist bump. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. If you would have been in a really super expensive car, would you have spent all that time there with that guy? I would have thought something. I would have been, my spidey senses would have been up even more. Our car is some cheap rental car. Like if you would have been in like a
I still would have done it.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I would have been too suspicious. See, that's what's funny is I'm talking about the difference between you and I. That's the whole story. And that's where people, when it comes into real life situations with their dogs being idiots and flipping out, I don't think people give enough credit to taking themselves through it better, right? What does that mean? Does that mean you need to go train? Does that mean you need to go meditate? Does that mean you need to go practice Tai Chi or yoga so that your body is a better tool, that you feel better in the situation?
Yes, the answer is yes.
You know what I'm saying? That's the part that people really need to look at, is the reason you can't get control of your dog's fighting is because you're not giving them what they need. You're not giving rules, boundaries, and limits. I'm sure part of it has to do with you're not balanced as a human. You're not taking care of yourself properly, and the dogs aren't giving you enough respect as a result of that. But once your dogs start fighting in the house, a lot of people have to go through some serious work to be able to get to where they can relax around their dogs again.
Yeah. And some people never get to that point, and they just do crate and rotate.
Well, sometimes, I mean,
that's management.
My interpretation is that if two dogs that live together will fight on sight, then you are in a really, really bad place. So if they will just come out of a crate, or they see each other from one side of the yard to the other, or they see, when they look at each other from any vantage point, immediately want to fight, you are probably beyond being able to fix that situation with those two dogs in that environment.
Hey, by the way, now that we're talking about like aggression, and this popped in my head, there is one type of dog that I will not take. And that is if the owners are living in fear of their own dog and the dog is trying to hurt them.
Oh yeah,
what's the point? I won't take them because,
and why not?
Because there's a lot of work on the human. I mean, there's always work on the human side, but trying to convince the human to not be fearful is a challenge in itself. Now, I will say that Lynn, I worked with him on he did a virtual, and he let me be part of it, a virtual session with a woman had a German Shepherd. It was a husband and wife. The German Shepherd, and the husband reached out to us like, hey, I'm really concerned about my wife, about like the dog going after her. It had happened. They had lived together for a long time. The German Shepherd was like 4 years old and had attacked the wife, had bit her in the arm and like didn't let go. Got startled and did that, but that became the association over and over, whether he had like really good rapport with her, but for whatever reason, when she had walked into a room and he got startled, he had his back towards her. And so he just turned around and just laid into her arm. And that became that association with her, because then she became extremely fearful. Now, Lynn, in his brilliance, I watched this whole thing. It was a long session. It was like an hour and a half. He was able to like really get into her head and to build her confidence to go and like grab the dog on leash, like all this stuff. It was insane. And I was like, this is why I send people to Lynn for those things, because I won't do it. Lynn is, I don't know how he did. I mean, it was a long thing, but it was really cool to watch how he was able to like just really guide her through that thing. Because here's the thing. If the dog was biting both people, we'd be having a different conversation. But it was only one person, and it started from one scenario, one situation. But she had to get over that fear of handling. He ended up coming down and helping them out. He did like his immersion where he goes for 5 days. He did that. He was in Austin.
At what point is it not fair for the human?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And here's the other thing is like, you have to, and you've been in these situations where, going back to the original question, is there fighting in the house? Sometimes the spouse actually appreciates it because like there's already fighting. They want to be separate from their spouse, it could go either way. And so the dog is kind of they're manifesting that, and the dog's kind of living that out, which I've seen. But I didn't get that. We didn't get that vibe from this family. They did rehoming the dog, by the way.
So that's my point. So at what point is, and this is where everybody's, well, I like dogs more than people. I get it, but let's stay with this, if you will. At what point is it unfair to humans to keep the dog in the environment when it triggers that level of reaction? I mean, let's go back to what I said earlier. Would you allow a human in your home that constantly put your wife or family in the level of fear that woman would be through with the dog?
Right.
At what point
for our ego too, by the way. Oh, I can fix
this. By the way, that's exactly what it is for us to say, oh, somebody else said, put the dog down, this won't work. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Look, we've all been there, but at this point in our careers, and it's easy to make decisions for dogs in a house with kids when you don't have kids. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? As things change, perspective changes. And I'm not saying that I'm always going to, we just talked about how much we'll advocate for certain things. I've literally jumped and dived on dogs and done, you know what I'm saying? I've put myself in physical jeopardy to help dogs, and more than one occasion, over and over again. So I will make the sacrifice, but the question is, at what point is it not fair for a human that's in that situation? And nobody really gives those people the right space. Everybody, no, you never quit. We never give up. You don't, da, 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 da. You know what I'm talking about? You're fucking guilted into submission.
Yeah.
If you go, hey, man, this 80-pound dog that I feel perpetually wants to bite me is kind of making me really afraid. And it's making it difficult to get through life. And people are like, well, you adopted it. So it's like,
yeah. And I mean, there's been on 2 occasions where I've worked with families that didn't prepare their dogs for a baby coming, and there's situations. And when it comes to kids, I'm a father, dude. Like, I'm very cautious about what I say and what I do, because I mean, we have to protect the humans as well. We have to protect the children. Like, that is by far the most important thing. I remember this one woman; she had a pity that was actually a really good dog, as long as there was humans.
yeah,
I mean, as long as there was adults. And so she was like, I was like, look, is there any place that this dog could go? She's like, yeah, my dad loves this dog. I was like, do you think he'd want to take him? She's like, yeah, he would. He's offered him. Like, there you go. Like, that's a solution right there. Like, your
I
baby's
start
going to be
with that.
safe,
Yeah.
and you don't have to put the dog down. You're not taking him to the shelter. Like, this is an option. Like, this dog can still live a very happy life in this environment. So we're providing a safe environment for the dog. You don't have to like stress out and work and figure out, like, is my dog going to be okay with my baby? Because no one wants to live in that scenario. That's too worrisome, man. Like, man.
Well, how about, did you just see that the woman got attacked and killed by a pack of dogs? Did you see that?
No, where?
On the street with her kids. And she got attacked by a pack of dogs. And I think she had 2 kids with her, possibly 3. She had 2 kids with
Oh,
her.
man.
And the older son, who I think was still young, tried to defend the sister. So he ended up getting bit pretty bad.
Oh, man.
And the woman was killed.
Mm.
And somebody had sent me, I'd read about it, and somebody sent me about it, and they said, what can you do? And I said, and because they had talked about, I live around
therapy for the kids. That's what we need.
That's just beyond that. And it goes back to, again, man, aggression is traumatic. And I don't think it's given enough weight in that response. And I think it's traumatic because there's visual things such as watching it. But I think from a primal animalistic standpoint, you can only survive so many animals chasing you down to eat you before you get kind of trapped in that feeling where you get so scared when you see another dog that you're like, fuck. Some of our clients are really afraid, really afraid when they're out with their dogs or they think their dogs are going to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to why I think so many people need a lot more help deeper than, some of the stuff that we can offer. We know what to do, but some of these people are, man, they've been in some stress and they never come out of it. Mm-hmm. And they separate their dogs right after they fight and they stay in the same mindset. Earlier you started to talk about that. Go back to that real quick while we wrap up, why it's important that you walk your dogs immediately following a fight.
Yeah, because basically what we're doing is we're basically dispersing that energy wave towards each other and moving the energy together. So for me, it's like if we are as a family, I mean, even my own family, we all want to move in the same direction, want to go together. If we kind of veering off, we're going to bring that family member in. But same thing is like the goal is to get the energy to, it's almost like it's coming out of its feet in a way. Like, I envision it actually, everything's just kind of flowing out of their feet when they're walking, and they just kind of move together. So they're not moving toward each other, they're moving together. That's the way I see it. And so basically we change the association where you don't go towards each other, we go together and we can coexist together. And so the energy starts to really, even on a walk, my walks are like, they're calm. Like that is what we're trying to create. So that we're creating the imprint to leave it exactly like that, because the way you want to end it is the way you want to start it next time. So meaning how they coexist together. And that's why we put them in the room together, so they can learn to coexist together, so that we want to leave it like that. So it's all about just kind of creating those associations, or like how they associate that particular, and you have to do it in every part of the room too, by the way. It's not because, you go outside, you got to do it outside, you got to do it inside, you got to do all these other things. And so it's not just like, oh, we go inside the couch and they're coexist, because you can go outside where the fight was at, let's say, and they can go right back to it. You have to do exactly what you do in every room as well, or wherever they hang out. In every scenario.
Especially where the fight was at. You'll see that if it was in the kitchen, or in a certain room, that when they get back in there, you might see the tension and all of that. So
That's the other thing. I know this is the last thing I'll say, but the other thing is, like, if dogs have gotten a fight over food, and, like, there's always that one that kind of moves it over, goes to the other dog food bowl. I'll even, like, tether inside the kitchen, put one food bowl, and you guys are going to eat together, but you can't go out. You just wait till they're all done, pick up all the bowls, put it away, untether them, take them on a walk, do it again, and just start all over.
When Blueberry first came into the house, I wasn't home, but there was a fight over food between her and Mr. Pickles. And I guess it was over a chicken finger. I came home, I took the chicken fingers and I threw them on the ground. and I left them on the ground, and then I took the dogs for a walk, came back in, laid them down next to the chicken fingers, and just basically said the chicken fingers are not a trigger for anything. It's a trigger for calmness. We have to walk, and it really, the walking. So the for Caesar's thing, follow, play, explore, getting dogs, especially follow and explore. Follow and explore is the calmest way to get dogs together, especially the follow. I like to do follow, and then I like to go in the woods and let dogs do a lot of explore together, and then follow on the way home. And those two things seem to really bond the dogs. The walking in the woods and sniffing things together, and then the following me and walking next to me and with me are very, very strong for the connection with the dogs.
Well, that is what our socials are: follow, play, explore. Because a lot of times, some dogs will go and play, some dogs will go explore, but at the end of it, they're all following the owners off leash. It just happens naturally. So they're able to fulfill. They're all able to go play, they're able to go explore, but at the end, they're all following the owners, which is really cool to watch. So awesome. There's so much to talk about this, by the way.
Yeah, we could do another one on it, or get some questions. If you guys have any questions about this episode, about aggression, about certain parts of dog interactions, I think understanding like the way dogs work together is really important to understand the overall big picture of how dogs feel about everything.
Yeah.
Right. So if you can't assess how a dog feels about another dog, how do you know how it feels about a horse? How do you know how it feels about a cat? How do you know how it feels about a human? So being able to figure out how a dog is developing a relationship based in respect and trust. What does that look like with each other? And, build from there. So if you have questions about it, leave them. We'll try to answer them in a follow-up episode.
Cool. Thanks, Todd. And I'll see you next week.
All right, man.
Have a good one.